617-282-0685. 617-282-0685.
Wow. Extra, extra, read all about it. It is that time again. Yes, welcome to All Things Black Politics, live from, well, normally I say live from Washington, D.C., but today I have the pleasure of being here live, yes, in Boston, Massachusetts, my hometown, here at Boston Black News and Boston Praise Radio and TV, enjoying the place, the important place, the faith place, here at Boston Praise Radio and TV and Boston Black News, enjoying, yes, with Pastor Bruce Wall. Thank you very much, Pastor Bruce Wall, for all the work you do to build our community and educate our community, yes, about all things politics and all things that are right in our community and some of the challenges that we face. But today we're going to talk about politics, and more politics. And by the way, I'm going local today versus, sometimes I talk about Washington politics, but today I'm going to talk about Boston politics. And today I'm going to talk about the city council and who's running for city council, who we know is running for city council, and who we think may be out of the city council running and who are pondering to actually run for the city council. Hold on. Wait a minute. Yep, you know those words. Hold on and wait a minute. Who's in? Yes, on the city council, the president, Ed Flynn, and councilors Ricardo Arroyo are in. Liz Breeden is in. Gabriella Coletta is in. Michael Flaherty is in. Ruth Z is in. Yes. Wait a minute. Erin Murphy is in. Brian Worrell is in. And Julia Mejia is in. That's what we know thus far. Councilors Frank Baker, Tania Fernandez Anderson, and Kendra Lara have not told us what their plans are for 2023 yet, but we do know who is running. And by the way, there's a newcomer. Yep, there's a newcomer. Jennifer Johnson has already mounted a challenge against Councilor Frank Baker in District 3. The Dorchester Reporter reported earlier this year. And Joe Richards, a Boston public school teacher who ran for District 4 seat that Andrea Campbell left open when she made a bid for mayor in 2021, also plans to run in the 3rd district. Wow, something going on in Boston, my good friends. And a lot of things are going on in Boston, not just politics. Wait just a minute. Hold on. Did you see what happened at the Boston Marathon? And I know we've been covering it here on Boston Black News, but I'm going to cover it in a different way. And that is, wow, wait a minute. The head of the for the lack of a better word, the Boston running organization, I forget the name of the running organization, Marathon, the Boston Marathon organization, essentially met with the black folks that were demonstrating after, the police department, and I think it's Brookline, actually started to go around the people and not allow the black folks to celebrate during the marathon. Did you hear me? The Boston Marathon folks said, hey, guess what? Those black folks down there, they're celebrating too hard. They're getting in the way. Stop them from actually celebrating. And that's what they did. The police department had the audacity to surround the black folks and essentially tell them to stop celebrating. Oh, stop celebrating so hard. Yeah, they had their music out there and was celebrating. And then the police department says, no, you can't celebrate. Now, the Boston Marathon folks have met with the black folks and the running club and essentially said that they made bad judgments, that they shouldn't have called the police department, and that everybody has a right to celebrate the Boston Marathon. That's a truism, folks. But this has been going on in the city for years. It's a segregated city, my good friends. Some people want to deny that Boston is no longer segregated. They want to say that Boston is a changing city. Well, if you come from the outside and look in at Boston, well, Boston is a segregated city, my good friends. And that segregation was proven once again when the Marathon folks called the police department and said to the black folks, you cannot celebrate equally as others in our city, in the city of Boston. But guess what? Who knows? I could be right. You can call in. 617-282-0685 is the telephone number. Again, 617-282-0685. I want to hear from you on this particular issue, and that issue is, did the city of Brookline, I think it was Brookline, Newton, I stand corrected. Slash that on what I said about Brookline, it's Newton. The Newton Police Department had the audacity to segregate black folks off of the streets of that fair city. And by the way, the city, the police department essentially has said, hey, guess what? We only did what, those Boston Marathon folks wanted us to do. We got 3 or 4 calls in that complained that the black folks were celebrating too much and actually moving into the street. And we wanted to make sure that there was public safety. Well, the backdrop of it is that now the Marathon folks, and you're all going to call me, and I'm sure, and correct me on when I say the Marathon people, but the Marathon folks have essentially said, hey, guess what? We messed up, and we apologize. Is an apology enough? Shouldn't there be a proactive way of addressing this and other issues of race in our fair city and in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? Isn't it time that we begin to address these issues straight up and straightforward instead of putting it backwards in some back place? This is All Things Black Politics. I'm Leon Rock. You can call in and tell, hey, by the way, I'm live here in Boston today. Can you believe it? 617-282-0685 is the telephone number. Again, 617-282-0685. Am I wrong about this? Am I overanalyzing this in saying that the city of Boston and its towns that participate in this glorious day of marathon every year for so many years? And by the way, when I was growing up, I didn't even feel comfortable going down to the Boston Marathon. And by the way, that's in the I'm not going to talk about age and how old I am, but the bottom line is that at some point, I never felt comfortable. I just never felt comfortable about being at the Boston Marathon. And old schoolers like me, I'm sure, never went down to the Boston Marathon. You can tell me if you did, by the way. If you're an old schooler, call me up. What is the number? 617-282-0685 or 617-282-7794. This is All Things Black Politics. This is Leon Rock, and we're talking about the politics of, yes, race in the city of Boston. The politics of race in the city of Boston. And by the way, as I indicated, there's a number of people running to essentially become a city councilor again, or a city councilor for the first time. And by the way, there are a number of people that are running. Let me go through that list again. Council President Ed Flynn, running. Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, who, by the way, I got to say this, and this is not an endorsement of anyone. Councilor Arroyo is amazing. I like that guy. Actually, we've had him on our program, and we plan to have him on our program again, Councilor Ricardo Arroyo. Actually, we want to get them all on. All Things Black Politics, because guess what? We want to talk about issues that are important to the African American community of Boston, so it's important that we bring them all on. Liz Breeden is running. Gabriella Coletta is running. Michael Flaherty is running. Rusi! I never get the opportunity to say her name correctly. Never do. I'm not going to butcher up her name. So Rusi, first name, is running. Julia is running. Erin Murphy is running. Brian Worrell is running. Yeah. And there's a couple of city councilors, as I indicated previously, that are maybe running. Councilors Frank Baker, Tania Fernandez Anderson, and Kendra Lara have not announced yet, but I believe that they're going to run. Frank Baker, I think Frank Baker has said just recently that he may not be running, actually. I think Frank Baker said that he may not run for office. I think that's breaking news. I'm not sure, but you'll remind me. Hey, hold on, wait a minute. There's something else that I like about the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Let's change the subject right here just for a second. The great Commonwealth of Massachusetts is allowing, yes, wants to give free to all state residents community college education. I think that's a dynamic opportunity there. What do you think? Well, Governor Maura Healey, yeah, she introduced the fact that she would like to make public community colleges free for all state residents who are at least 25 years old and don't already have a degree as part of her budget proposal. The House soon followed suit, pitching a $20 million kickstart of the program. Yeah, the Senate President Karen Spiegler, however, she doesn't buy the age restriction. Hold on and wait a minute. Breaking news. Thank you, Pastor Bruce Wall. After 12 years on the Boston City Council, District 3 Councilor Frank Baker, a rare conservative voice within the legislative body in the city of Boston, says he has decided not to run for re-election. That's breaking news, my good friends, is that Frank Baker is no longer going to run for that office. This should be interesting. I'm wondering how many people of color will take on that opportunity to run for that seat. Now, I understand that that district is a tough district for a person of color to actually win, but there's a possibility, my good friends. Will it happen? That's a good question. Well, the politics is running hard in Massachusetts. The things that are going on in Massachusetts are pretty interesting. I love connecting with the body politics of Boston, but I also love to connect with the body politics, yes, of Washington, D.C. And guess what? Normally I'm saying live from Washington, D.C., welcome to All Things Black Politics. But today I'm here live in Boston, Massachusetts, my hometown. Give me a call at 617-282-0685. If you want to talk politics, this is the program to talk politics. And by the way, there's no holds barred with my positions on issues that are important to you and to the African American community of Boston. Oh, by the way, I got to share with you, we're going to have a special guest in a couple of weeks. The first guest that is going to be coming on is a current state representative out of Dorchester and Mattapan. And then we're going to have a pretty interesting political person that has been on the airwaves across the country. And you can see him. He's from Flint, Michigan. He's coming into All Things Black Politics to talk politics with us and what's going on in Flint, Michigan, not just about the water, but as well as the body politics, how the city runs, how the city council runs, and some ideas on what, Boston politicians could do better. Yeah, he's going to be on. I'm not going to name his name, but he's going to be on within the next couple of weeks. We're having conversations with him and his team to get him on. This is All Things Black Politics. This is Leon Rock, and I'm glad that you're here. Hold on and wait a minute. We have a caller. Come on in.
Good morning, Leon Rock. How are you?
Good morning. And who is this?
This is Bill Wright.
Hey, Bill Wright. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Long time no hear.
Yes. You've had some interesting shows, and I know you're a busy guy, and you're running Washington, D.C. and all that good stuff.
I don't know about all that, my good brother. But Bill Wright, you are an amazing gentleman. You've been back and forth in this community around politics. You know it backwards and forwards. What's your take on all things politics in our fair city of Boston? What you thinking?
Well, the latest development appears to be that all of the Bs are leaving the city council, Baker, Bach, and apparently Breeden as well.
Oh, okay. And is there a reason why? Is there a reason why you think that all of a sudden folks are leaving?
Well, as you know, Kinsey Bach was named to be the new administrator of the Boston Housing Authority.
Correct.
And she, some years ago, had worked at the authority. As you may remember, I also worked at the authority with Doris Bunty.
Correct.
When she was the administrator appointed by Mayor Ray Flynn. And we were there in the 1980s during the time of the federally court-ordered desegregation of Boston public housing, which was accomplished by Doris, Ray Flynn, and Mel King. And as you may recall, the media locally and nationally were thinking this was going to be busing all over again. But thanks to the relationship between Mel King and Ray Flynn and the great work of Doris Bunty, it did not turn out that way. I handled the local, state, and national press during that time period.
Yes, sir. And what do you think about the appointment of the young lady, as you mentioned, on the Boston Housing Authority as administrator?
Kinsey Bach.
She comes with a phenomenal resume. Is she going to be able to do the work and get some results, particularly in? Yes, go right.
Well, Leon, her last name is spelled B-O-K, as you know. And during her campaign to become the city councilor from District 8, Beacon Hill, Back Bay, Fenway, I asked Kinsey if she was related to former Harvard University President Derek Bach, who was there for many years, as you know.
Yes.
And she said that she wasn't sure. I then said to her, Kinsey, that's not the right answer. The answer is, Uncle Derek?
Isn't that something? So she is a member of the Bach family of Harvard University, former president for many years. So why would she want to deny it?
Well, see, I don't know that she is. But I was just saying to her, as a political thing, she could always say, Uncle Derek.
Yeah.
But as you know, Frank Baker is leaving District 3.
Yes.
You also are aware that there's been a controversy about the redistricting of the council seats in Boston.
Right.
With more Black and Latino residents being added to District 3 from Ed Flynn's, council president, South Boston District. And, who knows what the real reasons may be for Frank Baker not running again. He also, during the past year at a council session, made some ridiculous statements about the conflict in Ireland between the Irish and the Catholics, trying to relate it to what was going on in the Boston City Council. And that foolishness, I'm sure, got him lots of national negative media.
Right.
So he maybe decided that his 12 years is a good time to leave. Certainly, like the other vacancies, there will be a number of people who will want to dive in and put their names up to become councilors. You may be aware that the city councilors in Boston are very well paid these days.
Oh, they are. No question and no doubt. Now the question. Let me ask you this now. Let's go straight ahead on this. Your observation: are they effective? Are they effective for their constituencies?
Okay, here's a key issue. The issue of an elected school committee was on the ballot as a referendum, non-binding, in 2021 during the mayor's race.
Correct.
77% of voters voted for returning to an elected school committee with 9 districts and 4 at large as the city council is constituted. However, when the vote came up in the council, the vote was in favor of an elected school committee, but that was vetoed by Mayor Michelle Wu, and apparently the council cannot override a mayoral veto. So what we have here, Leon, is a political leader, Michelle Wu, seeing 77% of the people whose children attend the school and whose parents pay the taxes going against the will of the people.
Correct.
To me, that is dictatorial.
We agree.
Huge mistake.
Yes. So then the question is, what is the African American community in particular going to do about it? Because most of the folks that go to public education that are lower income will tend to be African Americans. So what is the African American community going to do about it? And what is the city council, which are majority people of color, going to do about it?
Well, as you know, a large portion of the city budget goes to the school system. And last year, the state of Massachusetts came close to invoking receivership against the Boston Public Schools, which would mean that the governor would appoint who ran the schools. And the mayor, since the 2020 election, Mayor Wu, has talked about this hybrid school committee concept, which Dr. Gene McGuire, who of course was an elected black school committee member when it was at large seats, has said that a hybrid school committee does not exist anywhere in the world, never has, and of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, only Boston, the capital of the state, the capital of the Commonwealth, does not have an elected school committee.
Right.
Now, as far as what black people are going to do, last week a group was organized called the Black Men's Political Task Force, and one of the goals of that group is to increase voter registration. You know that we have a dismal turnout in the black community on election day. There might be 10 or 15% on a good election day, but if you're at the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club, where I tend to cover elections, you see people walk in to vote. They come out within 4 or 5 minutes. If you're at Holy Name Church in West Roxbury, you would be in a long line.
Right.
So the goal for the task force, one of them is, and the old Black Local Task Force got the districts changed. There was only at-large councilors and school committee members, 9 in the past. A federal lawsuit by the task force led to a judgment that changed it to 9 districts and 4 at large. Then, while Ray Flynn was the mayor of Boston, he got it changed to be appointed school committee. During the Menino administration of 20 years, appointed. Marty Walsh's administration, appointed. And the results have been that parents here look for charter school seats, private school seats, parochial school seats, and the Boston system as a last resort. Right. And as you know, Leon, I am a graduate of the Boston Public School System from kindergarten to senior year at Boston Latin School.
That's right. So
that's one thing. And of course, in the most recent city council races, the numbers of votes garnered by the winners in, say, District 7 and District 4, Tanya Fernandez-Anderson and Brian Worrell in District 4, were very, very low numbers. So if the Black Men's Political Task Force can do what the old task force used to do, interview candidates, have them answer questions from the community, and then to decide to create a card indicating which candidates we support at the polling places. If we can get significant numbers, we certainly can get more than the 100 that have been showing up in recent races. I would look to see the task force getting into the 4,000 or 5,000 number, and in that regard, can decide who ends up being on the Boston City Council in those districts, and of course at the at-large seats as well.
Bill, let me stop you there just for a second. Let's go backwards for a minute. New Black Political Task Force, Black Men's Political Task Force, great. Now I remember the old Black Political Task Force of the 70s. When I hear about folks thinking about who should be the representative and who black folks should vote for is pretty interesting, and pretty interesting. But what would be more interesting and more effective, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, is for a new black political task force to get into the weeds of community building, block by block, precinct by precinct, to get black folks to register and to vote as the critical mass place that black folks in Boston and in the Commonwealth need to be at. Because if you look at the data, and the data doesn't lie, Massachusetts black community, or Boston's black community, has the lowest black turnout of every state in the United States. Boston,
so we're first in something,
is
huh?
number one in turnout.
Well,
Number
Leon,
one in lack of registration.
Yes, and you know that a great part of that has to do with people losing faith. You know, Charles Hamilton, who wrote Black Power, talked about people will participate if their participation leads to a product.
Exactly.
If it does not, then people will not participate, even to the level of the basic responsibility of going out to vote.
That's right.
Right? And you look around, you see that in Chicago, there was just a black mayor elected. In every major city in this country tends to have either a black or Latino mayor, whether it's New York, L.A. L.A. just elected a black congresswoman, Karen Bass. In San Francisco, London Breed is the mayor. Houston has a black mayor. Dallas has a black mayor. Up and down the East Coast.
Come on now.
Baltimore has a young brother who's a black mayor.
Oh, come on.
The state just elected
That's right.
Wes Moore as the governor of Maryland, first black governor.
Right.
New Orleans, Washington, D.C., Atlanta. All of these cities have had, in some cases, multiple black mayors.
Exactly.
Right? And here, we've had two key opportunities to elect a black mayor in 2013 and 2021.
Bill?
In 2013, as you may be aware, Mel King attempted to have the candidates of color coalesce behind one candidate, which would have led to that person likely winning the preliminary, getting it down to 2, and then winning the final election.
That's right.
That candidate at the time was likely Charlotte Gola-Ritchie. But that didn't happen. It wasn't successful to get behind one candidate. So instead you had Marty Walsh and John Connolly. So you end up with an accidental mayor, just as what happened in 2021 when Andrea Campbell, now Attorney General, was already in the race in 2020. And, of course, it was announced on January 6th, that remarkable Washington Day, that Marty Walsh would be going to D.C. as the Labor Secretary for Joe Biden. And even though Campbell was already in and Mayor Michelle Wu was already in as counselors, both of them, it took the interim mayor, Kim Janey, at least 3 months, it was April 6th, I believe it was, when she finally announced her candidacy for mayor, which had the effect of just splitting the black vote and ensuring that two others, Michelle Wu and Anissa Sabi George, became the finalists.
That's right.
In other cities, Leon, black people figure out how to not have two strong candidates knock heads.
That's right. And so the question is, we know what happens and we can predict it. It's predictable. I actually did predict it right here on Boston Black News. What was going to be the outcome of the mayoralty race? I predicted it. And this is stuff that is predictable in Boston. The question is, when are we going to collectively change the predictables?
Well, hopefully it'll be this year, and the council is a place to start. By the way, I mentioned that Karen Bass is now the mayor of Los Angeles.
Yes.
And she is looking to get federal funding to help with the homelessness situation in L.A. And as a federal employee for many years and a Congress member, she knows the kind of funding that Washington has available.
That's right.
The previous mayor of Los Angeles was Eric Garcetti, the son of Gil Garcetti, who was DA during the O.J. Simpson trial. And Eric Garcetti, Leon, is my Columbia College fraternity brother.
Okay.
You may remember Anthony Williams, who was mayor of D.C.,
yes,
who won the election after the federal board was disbanded, and he won that election. He'd only lived in D.C. for a single year.
I know.
Anthony Williams is my fraternity brother from Yale.
Go ahead. Yes.
You know the name Eric Holder.
Yes.
Eric Holder, the Attorney General for Barack Obama, was my classmate at Columbia College, and Barack Obama is a Columbia College graduate before he got to Harvard Law.
So my good
this year in Hartford, Connecticut, Eric Coleman is running for mayor, and he was the deputy Connecticut State Senate president. And Eric Coleman, Eric Holder, and I used to play basketball in the gym when we were freshmen at Columbia in 1969.
When are you going to bring all that depth of experience to Boston to begin to assist the neighborhoods, the communities, in building structures that work politically? Political structures. You remember the old times of Kevin White? He had a machine. And he had a machine, period. And we have not had a machine, a black machine, since the bowling days.
Well, my good friend Jim Vincent, who's been for a long time the president of the Providence NACP, was one of those individuals who was part of the Kevin White team. I understand from Jim that he was the highest vote getter in the city, in his native South End, good friend of Mel King. And you're right, it's organization. I tell people, read The Last Hurrah, by Edwin O'Connor. It gives the story of how the Irish immigrants used the vote to gain political power back in the days when there was no Irish need apply, and they were treated, very badly by the locals, the Brahmins, and so forth. In Boston, the police commissioner was appointed by the state legislature when those folks were in charge. Once the Irish and Italians voted in greater numbers, they got that switch to now that most important appointment is made by the mayor of the city. And as you know, the current commissioner is Michael Cox, who was a former Boston police officer who was assaulted by white police officers years ago. He was brought back by Mayor Michelle Wu to be the current mayor of Boston. But again, people who have the most at stake, when I see little kids going to schools in Roxbury and Dorchester, black and brown kids and Asian kids, I know that their parents are the ones who have the most at stake, and of course, those kids' futures.
That's right.
Right? And you mentioned the numbers, people talk majority, minority, whatever. None of that matters if people don't vote.
That's right.
But whenever it comes time for elections in Boston, you may see that the Globe and the Herald will do man on the street, woman on the street interviews, and typically the person's response is, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It's not. They're all crooks. It doesn't." When I worked in Harlem with Carl McCall, who was a state senator, who went from state senate to becoming an appointed deputy UN ambassador at the United Nations by President Carter, after we removed Andrew Young and Brother Don McHenry went to the top spot, Carl, who was from Roxbury, was named one of the 3 deputies. We had cleaned up a drug problem on 123rd Street that got national press. But the thing is, if people don't understand that not voting, you pay taxes, you work, you pay taxes. Somebody decides how much of that money comes back to your neighborhood or not. So you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you because politics cares about your dollars. So if you don't decide to vote and decide to get your people who are for you into office, then somebody else will decide for you. Back from 71 to 81, when Tom Atkins was counselor to Bruce Bowling in 81, for those 10 years, where did a black resident of Boston go at the city council to get help with any issue they were dealing with? You go to the white guy who's Italian-American, the one who's Irish-American.
That's right.
You go to John Sears, the last Republican. What do any of them know about what it means to grow up in Boston and live in Boston as a black individual?
Zero.
Of course. And when Ayanna Pressley when Ayanna Pressley finally got elected in 2018 to be the first black person in the legislature, in the House from Massachusetts, all those years, Leon, you remember the Democratic State Committee here had cover from the fact that Ed Brooke was the only black U.S. senator.
That's right.
Even though a Republican. And now, in 2018, Ron Dellums was elected in Oakland to the House in 1970.
I know.
It took nearly 50 years for Boston to elect a black member of the House.
Isn't that sad? Doesn't
sad,
it
and it's a joke.
Doesn't it sadden you that politically in Boston, even though we have a colorful imagery in Boston in terms of its body politics, but the fact of the matter is, and it goes back to what I was talking about during the initial part of the program today, the broadcast today, and that is when something like you're trying to celebrate at a Boston Marathon, and you come out as black folks to celebrate the marathon, and then police come and kind of cordon you off and say you can't celebrate because you're black, because of your blackness. Isn't it sad?
Well, I went over to Boylston Street to watch the marathon the other day, Leon. And here's the interesting thing at the marathon. If you stand at the Prudential Center, the runners turn Hereford Street onto Boylston Street. Usually, of course, it's the wheelchairs that arrive first.
Right.
And there's a smattering of applause. Then the next you see are the African runners, typically from Kenya or Ethiopia.
Correct.
And then there's some polite applause. However, when that first white male runner turns that corner, the crowd explodes.
Explodes. Come on now. So essentially, you're saying your experience and the imagery that happens is that it's white versus black and Why in a city is it like that in 2023? What's going on in
Boston?
Again,
first of all, I saw them dig the hole to build the Prudential Center years ago when I used to sell newspapers on Huntington Ave.
Right.
But the thing about the history here, you saw the report in the Globe from 2018 saying that the average net worth of a white family in Boston was $247,000, and the average net worth of a black family in Boston was $8.
Yes.
You know that number between 7 and 9? 8.
I
right?
know.
Now, people thought it was a typo.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. That number, and of course, it represents home ownership in many cases for those white families.
Correct.
And renting for black families. But that situation tells you all you really need to know about what's been going on in Boston for generations. That didn't happen overnight. That's generations of racial discrimination, lack of opportunity in employment and health care. And for a time there, people were saying that the black community's health situation, especially on infant mortality, was like a third world country.
Correct.
Even though we have the greatest hospitals in the world.
That's right.
Henry Kissinger's wife comes here to be treated, you know? The top people who could go to Swiss clinics or any place else they wanted to go, they come to Boston because we have the greatest teaching hospitals. But all of those things do not connect with the black and Latino population in town. And I mentioned Carl McCall to you because one of the greatest decisions he ever made was to go from Roxbury Memorial High School, Dartmouth College, St. Andrews in Scotland, Andover Newton Theological. He's a Methodist minister, and his best decision was to leave Boston and go to New York, where he became a state senator, a UN ambassador. He became the comptroller for the state of New York.
That's right.
The person whose name is on every New York State check, who heads the largest pension fund in the world, and who headed the Wall Street Board of Governors for a time. And in 2002, he was the nominee for governor of the state of New York just after the 9/11 disaster. And had he won against incumbent George Pataki, who was assisted by Rudy Giuliani, Carl McCall from Roxbury would have been the governor of New York State, and Michael Bloomberg from Medford, the town where I was born, was the mayor elected on September 11th, 2001.
You know, when you mention all of this, I'm reminded that there's something missing in Boston politics and in Boston growth. And it is the capacity to join. Let me break this down just a little bit when I say capacity to join. Back in, and you know this better than I, in the 60s and in the 70s and some of the 80s, there was a place where black folks could go and join. There were many places. Today, in Boston's black community, there is limited places to join, to come together as groups of folks and actually have conversations about action, about progressive action. And there is one place that a whole bunch of folks have joined forever. And my question is, and I know the pastor is going to be looking at me on this one. My question is, for the place that black folks join the most, and that is the black church, what is the black church doing to actually make sure that black folks are safe, that black folks are empowered, that black folks have housing, that black folks have jobs, that black folks are doing well in Boston? Isn't it some responsibility for the faith-based community to lead more than ever in this crisis that we find ourselves in healthcare and in housing and in jobs and in just being safe in community? I'm posing that to you, Bill, but I'm posing it to Pastor too, because Pastor knows that the faith-based community seems to have not risen to the occasion in my hometown of Boston.
Well, you know, in one of his books, Charles Hamilton, who was one of my professors at Columbia Journalism, he mentioned that when the federal government first started hiring black people, many of the first people to be hired were those who had were church members who had held responsibilities in their church, whether it was a treasurer or a recording secretary or other things, who were well-educated and were able to take those federal jobs. You mentioned gathering places. John Bynoe's Professional Businessmen's Club was a location on Mass Ave, you know, near Tremont Street, where people could have those discussions, socialize, have serious debates about issues. And one of the things that's important about the elected school committee is that that is the way in which people have gotten to learn the ropes of running for office in this town. And if you think about the infamous Louise Day Hicks, she went from school committee to city council to Congress.
That's right.
And in New York City, there are political clubs like the Dr. King Political Club in Harlem, at which when there's an opening of a seat, say an assembly seat or a Senate seat, the members of the club debate to see who's the best candidate. And then they support that best candidate. In Harlem, the Congressman Charles Rangel, Senator McCall, David Dinkins, the mayor, Percy Sutton, the Manhattan Borough president, and Basil Patterson, the first black elected statewide as Secretary of State, you know, also the father of David Patterson, the first black governor of New York, they were able to work together. So whenever there was an election, they supported each other. In Boston, there is division, egotism, and there are people who are cutting their side deals in one way or another with what they see as the political power elite in City Hall, at the State House. You know,
right.
And as long as people don't sincerely want to organize and vote together to support our own, like other groups do, right? We're still going to have this sad situation. As for the church, I have to say that my observation is that many black churches, you'll see women and children. Many of the black men do not attend church regularly. Pastor Wall probably has a better sense of that than I do, but I'm just saying what I see.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Brother Bill, and that is, what about the talented 10th? You know the old adage, the talented 10th. There's a talented group of black folks that is 10% of the population, probably even larger. But that talented 10th seems to have moved out of Boston and allowed the community to, in many ways, deteriorate. And the talented 10th, the 10%, those thinkers and planners and opinion makers and strategists have essentially told other folks that live in core cities and the city of Boston, fetch for yourself. What about the talented 10th?
Well, you remember the partnership, and Flash Wiley and his wife, Dixon, the sister of Sharon Pratt Dixon, Benny Wiley, whose sister became mayor of D.C.
Yes.
They have been, for years, trying to encourage more black people to either come to Boston or if they come to go to college or university here, to stay and live in Boston. But, Leon, picture you're a banker with Citibank and you work in New York City, right?
Right.
And you have an opportunity to get a promotion to a higher level in your organization. And so you're going to be based in the city of Boston. So you fly up here from LaGuardia to Logan, and you get shown around your bank, downtown Boston. And you notice that the people of color that you see, the black, Latino people that you see, tend to be in the lower level positions.
Right.
As you go to the executive suites, you'll find that those are highly, majority white workers, right? Now, if you're a person who's raising kids as a family, and you know how different this place is from other cities in America, is it likely that you want to bring your family here? I worked at the University of Massachusetts for 16 years as Director of Public Information for this system, which, of course, has 5 campuses statewide, had about 60,000 students. I worked for President Michael Hooker, President Sherry Penny, President William Bulger, and President Jack Wilson. And we know that there are many students from parts of this country who get accepted at the MITs and Harvards and BUs and BCs, et cetera, who may want to come to Boston, but their family do not allow them to because of the reputation from busing. And this year, of course, we have the NACP coming to Boston. When they get here, for the most part, they're staying in the seaport.
Right.
And I can tell you, Leon, if the seaport broke off and floated out into the Atlantic Ocean, I doubt that there will be any person on that land flow that I know.
Right. And we're coming down, and Bill Wright, we're coming down to a few more minutes in this conversation. By the way, you've heard the resume in many ways of Bill Wright. Bill Wright is no joke to the body politics of Boston. He knows it backwards and forwards. And by the way, we appreciate the fact that Bill has come in and is having this conversation with us about what he sees, about what is going on in our fair city, the city of Boston, particularly in the African-American community. I have to say something to you, Bill. You are so right about if someone comes and looks at the city of Boston, if they were interested in becoming an employee of a organization, let it be a corporate employee or a nonprofit employee or just a general employee, coming to, establish some roots in the city of Boston, I'll tell you, my wife and I came on a flight this morning to Boston, and we haven't been up on this side of town for a long time. And we both raised the same question to ourselves while we were driving up. Has anything really changed in terms of services for these communities, Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, not the lower part of Roxbury, meaning the south end and that part of Roxbury, but Roxbury? Has anything really changed? What's your thoughts about that, Bill? Has anything that forget the politics for a minute and let's look at services. Has services really changed in the city? Can someone go to a restaurant or go places that are in neighborhood? Has anything changed, Bill?
Well, when you campaign in, say, a city council race or a state rep race in Rockaway, Dorchester, or Mattapan, one of the things you'll find is after a certain time of the evening, if you wanted to go and have a meal someplace, you can hardly find a place to have a meal in Blue Hill Ave or any place in Grove Hall and up and down Warren Street and so on. And the other thing that's different is if you go to Cleary Square in Hyde Park or, the different squares in other neighborhoods of the city, those are vibrant places after 5 o'clock with shops and businesses and restaurants and so forth. And at Nubian Square, which of course used to be called Dudley Square, it's a dead zone after 5 or 6.
Wow, that's a surprise right there. And Bill,
we
have 1 minute left, but go ahead and continue with your train of thought.
Okay, well, again, I would say that to Boston residents who are black, the trick bag is for people having persuaded you that your vote doesn't matter, and you could be outside of City Hall protesting, but they are more concerned, the politicians are more concerned if you're walking into that building and registering to vote.
Enough said. We heard it straight from Bill Wright. This has been Leon Rock, and this has been All Things Black Politics live